Hi, welcome back. So we are exploring episode 3 today. And I thought it was really important to talk about yoga therapeutics today, yoga as a therapy. And I know that there are different levels of expertise when it comes to yoga therapeutics. I've seen courses that are as long as a year, when it comes to yoga therapy.
Yeah, I think that's about minimum now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it is quite a serious, study and I guess career in some ways, and then I've seen short like add-ons for yoga therapeutics. And so I wanted to explore that a little more and just talk and really unpick what this looks like and what this is. So at the studio, we have a yoga therapeutics class, and the idea is that we're using it's more anatomy, it's more on like functional movement. So if we have lower back pain, if we have shoulder issues and pain, it's at a very general level. It's not that we're there to fix people's pains or really diagnose things. But it is about supporting somebody in helping them rehabilitate. So for example, if they are going through just some niggles, just, random niggles here and there, we're looking at really the physical movement of that body, that joint. So if it's shoulders, like how does the shoulder work? How does it move? And here are some poses to strengthen your shoulders. Here are some poses to stretch your shoulders. And here is an opportunity to really deeply relax the upper body. And so that's the way that we are supporting people's knowledge when it comes to yoga and using yoga as a therapy.
So it's more coming to a class to be targeted. So it's going to be not flowing movements. It's targeting, okay, let's have a look at this today, slow it down and actually let them feel all the poses. So
and it is about slowing it down, really. It's a very slow class. It's very, again, targeted, like you say. And every week, we're looking at a specific body part, so sometimes we can get, like our ankles can pronate or supinate, right? Like they can go inward or outward. We can get high arches or dropped in arches. And sometimes that can cause, misalignment with the feet. So we look at certain movements around the ankles. We'll look at the hip joint and pelvic pain, sometimes lower back pain. And how do we, get the posture of the lower back to start correcting, so we'll look at that.
Yeah, that's so important, especially if people spending so much time seated, so at desks. I think we've probably covered this a little bit before, but so many people, there's like 80% of people have like lower back pain.
Yeah.
And it's caused just by seated, slumping, bad posture. I'm one of those, but I'm not aware of it. I think we all are.
Yeah.
But so it's good to be able to come and like know those target stretches for that.
And I think it's what I think is really incredible is that we start realizing, I don't know, so I've heard this before, but where when someone will go in to talk about pain, for example, let's say it's wrist pain, right? That actually the lesion or the area that it's most likely coming from may not be the wrist. It actually might be up that arm more. It could be perhaps more up into the shoulder. It might be an impingement up here that reduces the ability to use that power and that strength. And so there's just a lot more pressure in the wrist, Or sometimes there's underlying conditions like carpal tunnel, things like that happens perhaps maybe from typing or texting, things like that. So we're not there to diagnose. And as always, we're responsible with, we encourage practitioners to also be responsible with asking for permission with their doctors and coming back and making sure that they're clear to practice. But we're really providing knowledge and information on how the body moves in a yoga way.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the important thing, to people realize that they'll come with us with so many, oh, we've got this wrong of like X, Y, Z. And it's like, oh, can you fix it? It's like, no, actually, no, we can't. We're yoga teachers. We do have knowledge of how our body moves, but we're not doctors. We're not medical trained in that way. We're not physios. So I do think it is worth, people understanding that. It's good to know their ailments so that we can kind of work with it.
Yeah.
But definitely before they come, get themselves kind of signed off.
Checked off. But then there's also different levels of expertise within the yoga world. So for example, you can be a yoga therapist, right? You can you can register as a yoga therapist. And so I am registered, and I did more of mental emotional health. So my studies was in our master's degree, we were looking at how yoga was an intervention, like a clinical intervention. It was used for mental health or for people that were going through cancer treatment or some kind of treatment where the charity or the organization is trying to build resilience, perhaps even to the medicine or the side effects. And so I've worked in various different clinical situations. And then when I worked one-to-one, yoga therapy was more of a, what do you do for your work? Like, how do you use your body? And where is the pain? Or is it, again, it could be that it's an emotional, mental stress. And so, and as a speech and language therapist in the clinical field, the way that they've worked it is that you're getting the background and the history of that person, and you are creating a plan for them for 4 to 6 weeks to where you're also checking in, and you're working it with, it's a patient-centered plan, and you're working together to help reach some targets. So the targets could be reduced pain, more movement, it could be a specific movement. And so you can be specialist in that area with yoga, but most of us are also, I think what happens as yoga teachers is if you were to go to doctors, they will say, lower backache, and they're like, oh, yoga is really useful for that. Yeah. But then we catch them as teachers, and sometimes some of us are not equipped really to support this, right? And so I think that's what led me on the journey to learn more about the anatomy, the physiology, and go through the yoga as a therapy.
Yeah.
But again, my focus was more mental emotional therapy. And so you're looking at the yoga nidras, you're looking at the deep relaxation, you're looking at these things. So in between medicine and in between treatment, there's really very little energy that some patients will experience. So at this point, it's how do you conserve their energy, So that's been, so you can see it in so many different ways, right? It could be a physical therapeutic exercise. Yoga can be used for mental and emotional as well. And then another thing that I've also seen is that they are part of programs. So we're looking at, when you go to like a therapy group, you'll have the clinician using mindfulness techniques. You'll use, the clinician will use like breath techniques, but they're not trained as yoga teachers as well. So actually it's really useful. We've had feedback from people that come to a yoga studio, but they're also seeking treatment at, with their psychologist or with the hospital or with the doctors. And they're saying that the impact of the yoga is a lot more profound at the yoga studio because we are experts in that side of things, right? Our voice, what do we do to support them to relax even more? How do we use the props to support them even more?
It's probably just more nurturing as well, isn't it? It's away from that side of things, coming into something that might be more relaxing. They can kind of switch off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly that. I think, and sometimes it depends on the setting. We've talked about that before as well.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of crossover, I think. And I think that that's what I've seen a lot of is that yoga can be so useful for physical therapeutics, because when you look at exercises, which I was going to come to you, they look like yoga exercises, right? If you've gone to a physio, if you've gone to a chiropractor. So I was going to lead it off to you as you've had.
So I work as a front of house receptionist at a physiotherapist, and sometimes I'll see them doing the exercises in the gym bit, and deep down I'm going, they're doing yoga. And I can hear them going like, oh, and just come into this like shape, down dog. And I'm like, oh, I hope they're doing it properly. So there is that crossover. They're doing it to rehabilitate, because the body has to move in certain ways. We know that, they've got, very deep awareness of what they're rehabilitating, but with that muscle usage of what we're working here to strengthen what's weak, let's strengthen it. There's definitely a crossover there.
Do you see, have you had conversations in your working environment where like a modification, like do they have all the modifications for the yoga poses? Like, are they quite familiar with that? Or, do you have conversations about
I just kind of always going like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Because I just want to learn why they're doing it, just because that really interests me, the anatomy side of things. Yeah. I mean, the modifications, they're doing it more for like with a purpose.
Sure.
And their exercise is modified to them, if that kind of makes sense. Where we tend to, we can scale up, we can scale down. Yeah. Where they'll go like, well, we'll go here. Once we've got this, then we'll add on something else. Yeah. There definitely is a crossover.
I remember being in speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physio, like physical therapy, that's what they would call it in the States. You would be part of allied health, right? So these offices are together. And so I had colleagues that were OTs, occupational therapists, and they would have, we worked in pediatrics with children, and they would have these cards for yoga poses, because it was about fine motor skills, gross motor skills, et cetera, but with occupational therapy, they were working with sensory as well. And how yoga is really supportive for like, if it's a sensory overload or a sensory processing issue, how yoga's been really useful to help children downshift, like if they are feeling really overstimulated. And then interestingly, in speech therapy, my focus was children with autism and ADHD. And it was incredible because a lot of our trainings would include some kind of yoga relaxation element. And this is at the time that I'm starting to learn about yoga and seeing how yoga was being brought into other places, right? If you're working in physio, you're seeing it in speech therapy, you're seeing it in the schools. Do you know? So it's an incredibly therapeutic tool, I think. We're seeing it in a lot of different areas now to help us all regulate in some ways, or
just by people are stretching as well, isn't it? Even like footballers do it.
Of course.
You see them in the middle of the pitch doing stretches, lunges, pigeons, and things like that. And they see it as, I'm doing a hip flex stretch, I'm doing a glute stretch, what it is. And we're like, that's yoga.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing,
that's ours.
What's amazing about yoga is that it has been around for thousands of years, right? Sure. So it ultimately, perhaps it was the oldest first form of movement that we have documented or that we've seen. And then there has been more science behind the movement, which has led to anatomy books that we use, right? Yeah. We use these anatomy books to learn ourselves and then also, of course, teach. But it's amazing to see how it does underpin a lot of different areas of living, I think,
I just think it just brings so much value to lots of areas, different stages of life. Because, even chair yoga is, to a degree, yoga therapy. People that, might have had strokes, you're telling them to raise your arm. Their arm might not raise, but they've still got that neurological kind of connection going on. Where otherwise it's kind of like you're just going to sit there. If you don't use it, you lose it. So they might have lost it, but there is that chance by keep doing something. People have sat in a wheelchair and they might not have their feet on the ground. They're always on, the steps. And it's good to have that connection down to the earth, just get their feet down on the ground to actually feel that. So there is,
that's what I feel has been in these yoga therapeutic courses. You know, it's what are we trying to achieve, right? We're not trying to achieve hands to toes. We're trying to achieve a lift and a reach for perhaps lower back, upper back. You know, what is like really the objective? What is it that we're trying to do? And how do you get there in different ways, right? It doesn't have to be straight legs, hands to toes. And I think that that's what's really great about yoga therapeutics being born, is that it's given yoga a different, like another opportunity to be really valuable in a sense that, because yoga can look, well, I've heard it referred to as like Indian gymnastics, but it could absolutely mirror gymnastics in some ways, because traditional yoga was strength building, right? But then BKS Iyengar yoga, he was looking at props. He was actually seeing that not all bodies will move in the same way based on injury, based on scar tissue, you know, whatever the case is. So we use props at this point now in his class or his style of class, right? For alignment.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that that's a really important thing, especially with all the marketing out there on what yoga could look like. Because I mean, how many times do we see yoga, someone sitting in this, you know, with the sun, like in the sunset, you know, and it looks really peaceful, right? But how yoga as propaganda or like as marketing, it looks really good for mental health. It looks really good for physical health. But I do think in some ways it puts pressure on the teachers if they're not well equipped to be able to give and offer that. But then at the same time, it's incredible that it does offer so much for physical benefits and health and mental health and emotional health as well.
Yeah. So I mean, going back to like that kindness of like how you want to move your body, and you have props with Iyengar. And then there was going back to the Bikram days, obviously Hot's my background, and him going like, you will not use props. You will not bend your knees if you don't bend your knees. And I think he used to think of the body as like a vessel, or you have to heat steel to make it bend, which is why it's hot. And so he kind of went things a very different way, not so therapeutic way.
No,
you will do it my way. You will.
Some of the traditional teachers were like this, you know, but I do think in the last 50, 60 years, we're looking at so much more understanding of how our bodies are different now, especially in modern day living, the more that we are on screens and the more we are driving. Of course, the bodies have changed now, right? And so what we've seen is when I was, you know, studying, there's just, the research is not old. It's, you know, for research to be 20 to 30 years, that's not old actually, you know? And so I think it's really incredible that we are putting a lot more money now into researching the effects and the benefits of yoga. Yeah. You know?
Sure.
So do you have any experience in your own, you know, in your studies when you were studying to be a teacher, or any CPDs where yoga therapeutics was a part of your studies? Because I know Kathy Rand had done.
Yeah, I didn't do it with Kathy.
Okay.
So mine would be more going towards the yoga nidra side. So I actually did trauma informed, can't think what it was now. I think it was along the lines of yoga nidra, but more aimed at kind of the trauma side of it. So just being extra mindful in how you're wording the relaxations, because a lot of people that do go towards yoga nidra have had traumas. It has been used for PTSD, because you are going into that deep sleep. So if nobody knows what it is, you're in that hypnagogic state of not being awake, not being asleep. And
it's very vulnerable.
It is, very vulnerable. You know, we're saying, you know, if your thoughts come, you know, acknowledge, witness. But if you have had trauma, there's going to be some really serious stuff coming up. But hopefully by doing this guided meditation, doing body scans, and visualizations, it's allowing them to get to that state of rest which I think it's like half an hour of rest in Nidra is about, is it 2 hours of sleep? So somebody who's had a lot of trauma, you know, that's something they're on high levels of symptomatic, I can't say it, fight and flight. So they do need to kind of bring their body down to that rest and digest.
Yeah, so a lot of studies that I have done as well when it came to yoga, short courses that were trauma informed, it was really about regulating again, because if they are in their ups and downs, that's how do we get it to a level that feels consistent and safe, really, you know?
And it's sort of things, if you know, you're in a room, you're lying there, you're asking them to close off the eyes, and there's suddenly a bang outside, you know, that can bring people's trauma back. And it's making them feel really safe, that they say, this is a safe environment. And if you hear any noises, it's all okay. But that must be really hard to deal with, really hard.
I know that for therapeutics, I think it's a really, it's encouraged more like one-to-one. You know, I do think that when it comes to like the serious yoga therapeutics, I do think one-to-one is a really important thing, versus group classes. I think, you know, where we're really looking at different opportunities to allow, you know, is it just general wear and tear? Is it just general aches and pains? And is it specific? And I really think that that's just perhaps the layer is, you know, you've got your general classes and then you've got your privates. You've got your private one-to-one classes, you know, where you can go a little deeper, whether it is working on a particular area or working on a particular, you know, anxieties and things like that. So, you know, we're not counselors in a yoga therapeutic session. It wouldn't be counseling in that sense. But it was, you know, it was embedded in some of these courses, like just general counseling skills. Just because talking is really important, getting to know someone's background, just at least however much, you know, people want to share, so that you know how to take care of them, or how do you support them really? If it's like head or neck or shoulders, like how do we set them up for success if it is, you know, deep stretching, etc. So I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed as yoga as a therapy is bringing it back to our own experience. I feel that, so in my family, there is a history of ADHD. And I do think that it's an incredible tool to, because when it comes to a brain that has a neurodivergence, right? The brain is different. They are lighting up in different ways, or it, you know, and everything is a chemical reaction, really, right? Like, so if we're feeling really restless, or we're feeling like high energy or high hyperactivity, it's just some kind of chemical inside of us that is overproducing. And it tends to be the calm ones that are being underproduced, right? So the GABA, the serotonin, right? And we'll hear that here and there. You know, we're not experts, but we know and we hear in our courses and stuff that these are the feel-good chemicals. These are the feel-good things that your body experiences. So I do think that yoga has been an incredible tool for the clients I've worked with when they are in the middle of treatment, you know, if they are going through chemo or radiotherapy and things like this. But even for my own energy levels, for my own, because we think about what is therapy? What is rehabilitation? It's to feel better again, right? It's to get back to either the physical health at its priority, you know, like what is your highest level that you can reach after an injury? Or what is your highest level that you can reach of feeling good, you know, with medicine, perhaps if you are taking antidepressants or if you're taking anti-anxieties, you know? So I think that's it's a great non-medicine tool. I think that we can be adding in for all of us, from general level to highly specific. I think that yoga has been quite therapeutic in that way for my own personal experience, because it allows my brain to reach things that it perhaps couldn't reach if it was really dysregulated. If I was feeling really dysregulated, it's given me an opportunity to regulate, you know, what medicine probably could have done as well. So I just think it's been really useful. And my brother's diagnosed with it as well. And so I feel he's at his best when meditation is a part of his life. It's that morning routine and really setting himself up for his day.
So do you think it is the routine? Is he medicated?
He was medicated. He's now off of medication.
Okay.
And he is, I think it is the routine, but what he's adding to his routine. So for example, his routine, if it was just to go out for a jog, or if it would start with meditation and then go out for a jog, you're still looking at two different ways his day can go. And I just love that meditation and yoga can be now considered intervention. Do you know what it added in as a prescription, if you will, you know? So have you had any experience with this, or have you had or seen or, had stories about?
No.
It's mostly physical though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because my background's been mostly mental, emotional, and then again, working with children that have these diagnoses. So that's been a really incredible opportunity to bring. And I think that's what's great about having yoga in schools and why schools are so welcoming to it. Because I think they see a lot of children.
Yeah, I think they really open up now, like the children with it.
Yeah. They do.
It is play,
really enjoy it.
they're moving their bodies. But I think, again, it's that chance for discussion, emotions that children, sometimes can't handle. They don't know what they are.
Big feelings.
Yeah. And I do think then, with the yoga going into the school, that they can express that. Again, it's in a safe place and it's understood. Where sometimes, depending on home lives, it can be suppressed. So, I think having it quite young for that kind of like school level, therapy level, I think that is like a really good add-on.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm seeing, like we've said, with athletes. We're seeing it in sports. We're seeing it. Well, sometimes athletes can overwork their bodies so they can go into what they'll call adrenal fatigue or chronic fatigue. So their muscles are just very tired, right, from overworking, repetitive movement. Yeah. And so yoga has been a therapeutic, again, rehabilitation, getting it back to what feels good again. And so overtiredness doesn't feel good. So how do we get it back to feeling good again? So it is about, adding yoga in to start resting those high levels of adrenaline, cortisol, whatever it is that's overworked them. So you've got it in the athletic field. And this is what I really loved about, I felt like yoga really just kind of couples in with a lot of different industries. So you've got yoga for health and wellness, right? And that's mainly where we sit. But yoga's in the psychology world. Psychologists are using, because the mind-body connection now is big in psychology. And I do feel like there's this movement here, like just generally, we're working towards a holistic look on that person. They're holistically looking at that person, that whole person. It's not just different parts of a person anymore.
I think that is the big thing. I think that is the big shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it is the whole person.
Yeah.
Not like, we're going to look at this and then forget about all of this.
Yeah.
And I think bringing it all together, it's definitely bringing that balance back to people. Like you say, the athletes out there constantly pounding.
Yeah.
Not having that switch off.
Yes.
Always on high alert.
Yes.
That's just, it must be a crazy world to live in, to be fair.
Yeah, for
sure. And then to have downtime. But that could be hard once you've been so up here to be down here.
And I don't think you'll choose it. I think what happens is that the body is choosing for you.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, you've got to be on that high alert, haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean, we need the balance of both. But if you're always expected to be performing, to training, then you are going to be living on that high adrenaline side.
On one-sided. Yeah. And I think that this is where that word holistic comes in, because whole, right? Like looking at someone as a whole picture, it's holistic health. It's I think yoga is definitely, again, in this health and fitness. It is definitely in that field, but it's in psychology. It's in the medical field now. You've got a lot of medical doctors, adding in yoga as part of their practice in the States as well. Or sometimes you've got medical doctors that actually become yoga teachers, and they're starting to look at this more Ayurveda and this Eastern way of looking at a person, while we're also looking at them in like the symptomatic, like treating the symptoms, etc. So I just love that yoga can really kind of add in to different areas that we're seeing. What other areas are there? So I've seen it in psychology. I've seen it in medical. I've seen it. So we're health and wellness, right? You're seeing it in physio.
Yeah.
To be able to see the yoga poses and the
rehabilitation.
Yeah. So I do think that adding in yoga to any type of regime is really important. I think, and that's what's so lovely about even gyms. They'll have yoga a part of it. I know we've talked about the specialty of yoga being at a studio, right? And yoga being at a gym. But I do think that yoga is being added in now to a lot of different things. I've seen recently it was, mixed martial arts. And now there's more like breath work in like just guest teachers coming in to support breathing for those that are in mixed martial arts or like, again, fighting, like if they're training to fight. So they're really starting to add this in everywhere, and I think that's, there's a shift that's happening.
I think people are wanting it as well. People are realizing, they're seeing the benefits from it. There's more education around it. And I think the gyms then are going like, oh, okay, you better deliver.
And stretching, because we know now, right? Like stretching is, the way that I've seen it is that, they've known like 100 years ago, it's like you need to build strength. How do you build strength? Repetition and resistance, right? This is how you're building your muscle. Actually, after building strength, the body can still get stiff. So now while building strength, you want to stretch. So runners are going to stretch before they run. And you'll see there's like a cool down session now, right? In different group exercises. The cool down session is sometimes breathing and stretching.
Yeah. And right? I think that was the thing, wasn't it? People were just going out, either strengthen.
Yeah.
It's like, why is my body so stiff?
Yes.
And then realizing, well, actually, I need to get my muscles warm before I do all of this.
Yes.
Because why am I injured? This is why I'm injured, because we're not doing it. So I think it becomes through prevention as well, doesn't it? Knowledge.
Knowledge and education and the research that's
and we're a lot more sedentary now than we ever used to be. So if you think a lot of people might have sat at work all day, kind of all the muscles are relaxing, not being used, suddenly going to the gym and then pounding things out. I mean, that's a real shock for the body. So I think we are becoming a little bit more informed that you've sat all day. Let's at least warm these poor muscles up before you want them to do the strenuous work. And then rather than just switch them off, let's just cool them down, give them a stretch.
Yeah. I do think that cooling down now is part of just, a lot of exercising and fitness now. And because of that knowledge, like you're saying,
I'd like to say that in yoga, we've been doing that for a long time.
Well, here's the thing, right? So what I think that I've just been seeing portions of yoga in different things now. I'm just starting to see it. And the thing with yoga is that you are looking at it in 4 different ways. You're looking at yoga in a physical way. Yeah. So you are going to see it in like the athletes and the cool down sessions and your group exercises, right? And you're seeing it in a mental way. So with a lot of mental health difficulties that, at the moment, even though access to mental health services have grown, mental health needs have grown even more than that, since COVID as well, that they're saying. And perhaps we're talking about it more, perhaps we're more aware of it, but you're seeing yoga there. Part of this is now more of the slower yoga. This is more of that meditation type of yoga. Emotional health as well. I do think mental and emotional health can go together. And then the 4th part of yoga, which we have in our teacher training. So when I do the theory section, this is what we'll talk about with the teacher trainees, is we look at a person's well-being in 4 different portions: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and then we talk about the spiritual. And that always will bring up questions or a discussion, because what is that? What does that mean? Sometimes it is, does that mean prayers and things like that? But actually, when we have it in a checklist, when we're looking at, when the trainees take this for themselves, the spiritual section is connecting to people. So communities and feeling like you belong, like that connection, connecting to nature. So they'll talk about more of these types of things. So more like relationships. And
I would say we're very disconnected now. Modern world was too much kind of insular. You can be, especially I think after COVID, a lot of people found maybe their comfort. But, you're locked in the rooms, not locked in, but we had to stay in. But now moving out, people's habits have changed. And I think a lot of people now do spend a lot of time more solitary.
I think we've got more access at home now, right? Like anything can be delivered at your home.
Yeah.
So in some ways, you don't have to go out if you don't want to.
I know. I think that even is, we live in a village and we wasn't really able to get like Ubers, Deliveroos, whatever they were. And now they're coming to our village and it's crazy.
I know.
You can get kind of like fast food delivered within half an hour, which is ridiculous because we live half an hour from the town.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
They're literally making it and throwing it out.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
you don't have to go out. We get our shopping delivered online.
Prescription medication you can get at home as well.
Everything's online.
And doctor appointments, you can actually talk to your doctors or your nurses and things like that. Because now we've got an app at our doctor's surgery. Like, so it is this app that you can get on. And again, you can do one-to-one. But speech therapy was actually is online as well. So before COVID, we didn't have online offerings.
Yeah.
And so now it's available. Now, of course, it depends on the need of the child or the person. But you can get therapy online as well,
They do physio online as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I do think when it comes to isolation and disconnect, yes, I think we're definitely at a higher risk. And sometimes also just being out and, families could be out, but because there's phones, like, there's such an attachment
surgically
to our phones.
attached to hands.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that even then, sometimes I feel like the quality of time together is distracted, right?
Oh, totally agree. So distracted.
Yeah.
People have got watches now. Mine sometimes does it. But you can get messages on your watch.
Notifications constant.
Yeah. And to begin with that's kind of just like so freaky.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's calling.
And I know it's good because it keeps us connected. And I understand, why we're heading in that direction. It's convenience, right? Like everything becomes convenient. However, I do think a lot of people will agree that it is counterproductive, right? I think it is, it is just increasing distraction. And so the final bit that we talk about in the spiritual side of it is how disconnected do we feel? Do you know what I mean? Like even though we're around people, do we still feel isolated while we're with people? So again, we're looking at therapy and rehabilitation is an opportunity to fix a problem. So physically, if there's a problem, we go to therapy to fix it. Mentally, emotionally, if there's a problem, we'll go to therapy to fix it. Spiritually, if we feel disconnected, yoga is the therapy to feel connected. So I just love that yoga can be part of the fix physically, part of the fix mentally, emotionally, and part of the fix spiritually. Because I do think what other items out there have had so many components of yoga in there. Do you know what I mean? Like how many therapies out there, or how many things out there can be in the mental health world and the physical world and the health world and the fitness world and the psychological world. It's in consumerism. So basically what they're doing is they're looking at when a body is calm, like when the brain is calm, it's not going to really feed into consumerism. It's not going to feed into the buying, right? So actually, how do they get us really enticed so that we're buying more? So actually, in some ways, a calm life is really boring life and probably would mess up our economy and consumerism. But ultimately, really, it's that that's another therapy. If we feel like we've got these addictions, phone addictions, shopping addictions, like the dopamine, right? Like, I mean, there's so many things out there now about dopamine fasts, right? Like you're just like disconnect from the dopamine. So they're seeing that the reward chemical is just constant. So guess what? The things for those dopamine fasts, or those, you know, those chances to like fix the high levels of dopamine or low levels of whatever it is that they're saying, guess what? It's again going back to yoga. It's using yoga components to get back to feeling calm and not feeling so addicted to things.
But it's the fact that I've seen these things come through on my social media.
Yes, of course. Exactly that.
Kind of feel like, you need to do a dopamine fix. You need to get off of it. Okay. Read more.
Well, that's true, right?
And I mean, it's so ironic. It's like, you need this, put it away. No, read more.
Well, I mean, saying that, like, you know, being on YouTube, like we've got videos on YouTube. We've got, of course, our podcast, you know, so we're, you know, it is just the world that we live in, right? So we're very in that digital age, but I do think that underlying, I think the answer to a lot of these modern day and specific problems, I think it lies in yoga. I really think that, which is why yoga is powerful and why yoga is therapeutic, and why the studio stands for both. Yeah. I think ultimately that's what it is, because we've got the powerful practice, but I actually don't mean that in a literal way. So yes, you do have the hot yoga and the power practice, and you've got the stretch and restore and the calming practices. But I actually also mean that powerful yoga could be just relaxing. Like that's powerful to sit and relax and stretch.
And it's actually harder.
And incredibly hard.
Yeah.
You know, incredibly hard. So I really, I love that we were able to talk about that today. I do think that that's a really great way to look at yoga if we haven't really seen it in that way. I just feel like recently I've just been seeing a lot of this holistic keyword. Before it was well-being, and now definitely the keywords are holistic and wellness. And what does that mean? And I think that therapy and rehabilitation is definitely, it's meant to be a solution to a problem. And I do think that we're overstimulated. I do think that, you know, we do have specific diagnoses of ADHD and bipolar and these things that, you know, anxieties and depressions are out there. But doctors are saying, as well as getting medicated, go seek out yoga, go seek out yoga classes. But again, not one size fits all. Yeah. And I think that that's really important, you know. Anything else that you feel that you wanted to add on before we finish off today?
I think that's pretty much rounded.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for joining. I think it's an important thing to have brought to the audience, just to give them an opportunity to see how yoga is so therapeutic, or can be so therapeutic, or they're saying that it's therapeutic. Not necessarily are your teachers trained for the therapy. But I do think it's an important thing that we want to be able to deliver. So very soon, it'd be amazing to launch professional development where yoga can be, you know, we can look at this in different ways for those that are wellness professionals, not just yoga teachers, but that would like to see a little bit more about how yoga can be therapeutic. So hopefully more to come on that. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
See you soon.